All right, today we're diving into a story that is, frankly, just incredible and often totally misunderstood. We're talking about cargo cults. It's this amazing tale of prophecy, colonialism, and what happens when one world crashes headfirst into another. But let's just start with a question that gets right to the heart of the mystery. I mean, why would you build an airport out of bamboo? Seriously, clear a jungle, build a landing strip, put up control towers made of wood, when you know for a fact no actual plans are coming. It sounds completely irrational, right? Well, as we're about to see, there was a powerful logic behind it all. Okay, so to really wrap our heads around this, we've got to start with what people were actually doing, the specific and sometimes strange rituals that came to define these movements. I mean, just look at this. You have communities in Melanesia meticulously recreating the stuff they saw in the Western world. And they aren't just building little models for fun. They're performing the exact activities they saw foreign soldiers do, marching in formation with fake rifles, sitting in bamboo control towers. It all leads to the big question. What on earth did they think this would accomplish? To get that answer, we have to rewind a bit. We need to understand the world these rituals came from, because this wasn't just some simple misunderstanding. It was a deeply human response to a massive, world-shattering cultural shock. So try to imagine this. You live in a society where your status, your wealth, everything is built on complex personal relationships, on tradition, on spiritual contributions. Then suddenly, these outsiders show up, and they have a seemingly endless supply of stuff. Radios, canned food, trucks, that just seems to materialize out of nowhere. You never see them making it. To you, it would look like straight-up magic. And this slide right here, this is where you see the huge gap in thinking. In the traditional Melanesian worldview, wealth always had a spiritual side to it. So, seeing all these colonial goods, they figured it couldn't just be from labor. It had to be coming from a supernatural source. And the most logical conclusion they could draw was that these foreigners had somehow found a way to intercept the goods their own ancestors were trying to send them. Disbelief, this powerful idea, it gave rise to a whole new prophecy. It was an explanation for what was happening to them, and it was a promise of liberation through the return of something they called cargo. So what is a cargo cult, officially? Well, here's the definition. It's a belief system that expects a new, perfect age is just around the corner. And this new era is going to be kicked off by the arrival of a huge shipment of Western stuff, the cargo, delivered not by ships or planes, but by their ancestors or their gods. But, and this is absolutely crucial, this was never just about getting stuff. This was a revolutionary prophecy. Believers thought the entire colonial system was about to be destroyed, that the power structure would be flipped on its head, and that they would finally get the status and wealth they felt was stolen from them. Now, these kinds of beliefs had been bubbling up for a while, but World War II, that was the explosion. The sudden arrival of hundreds of thousands of American soldiers with just unimaginable amounts of equipment and goods seemed to be the prophecy coming true right before their eyes. Then, just as suddenly, the war ended, and they left. And that created this huge void and this urgent, desperate need to bring them and their cargo back. Okay, so with all that context, let's zoom in on the most famous and long-lasting cargo cult of all, the John Frum movement on the island of Tanna in what's now Vanuatu. So picture this. It's the late 1930s, and this spiritual figure appears on the island. We don't know if he was a real person or a vision, but his message was powerful. He called himself John Frum, which people think was just a local way of saying John from America. And his promise was simple. He was going to get rid of the white colonials and bring in a new age of abundance. And it's just fascinating to see how this movement grew and changed over time. It started as a call for cultural revival, getting people to go back to their traditional customs, or custom, which missionaries had tried to stamp out. Then, boom, the U.S. military shows up during the war, which they saw as absolute proof the prophecy was real. After the war, those rituals we saw earlier really kicked into high gear. And eventually the whole movement even turned into a legitimate political party that's still around today, fighting for local rights. Which brings us right back to those rituals. Every single year, on February 15th, John Frum Day, his followers march in this military-style parade. They paint USA on their chests. They carry those bamboo rifles, not as a threat, but as a sacred ritual to honor their Messiah and call for his return. It's this incredible public statement about who they are and what they hope for. But if we stop there, if we just focus on the bamboo rifles and the wooden planes, we miss the entire point. Because the deep, burning desire for cargo was never really about the stuff itself. And this quote right here, this is the absolute key to the whole thing. The hunt for cargo was really a hunt for dignity. It was a spiritual movement, a way to try and get back the cultural honor that colonialism had stripped away. It was a demand for respect in a world that had made them feel powerless. So yeah, on one level, cargo meant trucks and Coca-Cola. But what did that stuff represent? It represented dignity and sovereignty. It meant freedom from these weird foreign economic systems. It was a hope for a total moral and economic reset that would finally make their world right again. And that's exactly why the term cargo cult itself is seen as so problematic these days. It's a label that was slapped on by outsiders, and it's full of colonial baggage. It often boils down these really complex social, political, and religious movements into a simple, patronizing story about primitive people who just didn't understand technology. But what's really wild is how this idea has jumped from anthropology into our everyday language as this powerful metaphor. You hear people talk about cargo cult science, right? That's when someone is just mimicking the methods of science, doing the rituals, without any real understanding or intellectual honesty. Or cargo cult politics, where a country adopts the symbols of democracy, like holding an election, but has none of the real substance, none of the institutions that make it actually work. And that kind of brings us full circle, doesn't it? The original cargo cults were a deeply rational response to a world that had been turned upside down. When you look at our own world, our rituals around consumption, politics, and technology, it's worth asking yourself, what are the things we do just going through the motions, hoping for some kind of magical result we don't fully understand? What are our modern cargo cults?